की support करनी चाहिए.
And it is heartwarming to see this initiative. I'm sure you have received more objections than support, and I trust that this will not deter the panel in their deliberations. I believe that most of the issues that I will highlight have already been emphasised by much more qualified friends than myself. So please take my views as another angle and voice which lays further emphasis on the issues under consideration. My name is Dr. Harjinder Singh Lallie. I'm happy to be recorded. I'm a university reader at the University of Warwick. My specialist area is cybersecurity, within which I specialise in digital forensics. I also hold a visiting lectureship at the University of Oxford. I do not speak on behalf of my employer today. I am the chair of Sikhs in Academia, and I begin by outlining who Sikhs in Academia is before moving on to answering two of the questions that you have asked in your call. Sikhs in Academia were formed in June 2023. Our members are staff and students at university. They work in a critical UK sector comprising more than 2.25 million students and staff, representing around £46 billion of the UK market share in 2021-2022. Our members are primarily UK-based, but we are seeing a rise in membership from North America and North India. There's a lot of interest in what we do. Our members teach students, they assess their work, they provide pastoral support. Students approach us with a wide range of issues, from initial access to the university, progression through studies, many welfare issues. We are the one group that is the closest and most intricately involved with student affairs, because we're there, we're on the ground every day. Over the past 4 years, our academic members have fielded a dramatic rise in mental health issues amongst the student body. And in our view, this is a serious and growing problem amongst the student population. I raise this point because this is an issue of representation which our existing bodies have failed to represent. The student body are a significant group. They are the future of our community. Our committee comprises a cross-section of universities, both professors, academics, students as well, who lead our student exec. We have ensured that the student voice is strongly represented within our community. And this is, again, an illustration of needing to have that cross-section of voices, cross-section of genders. Not everyone on our committee is Amritdhari. They're all in different points of their religious journey and their spiritual journey. And to be quite frank, it's not a question we ask when someone joins our committee. We aim to support our members around issues affecting them, such as career progression, employment representation, issues affecting equal rights, but most importantly, to help them project their voice. So we are here today talking about representation, and Sikhs are, in my view, very poorly represented in academia. The research that Sikhs in Academia have undertaken so far reveals that in the UK there are no Sikh Vice-Chancellors. There is one Pro-Vice-Chancellor, no deans, several associate deans, 1,200 lecturers, of whom 2/3 are female, which is absolutely brilliant, but that's still not a high enough number. And collectively we form 0.3% of the UK academic population, which is disproportionate to the actual population in the UK. But more worryingly, just 0.03% of the PhD community are Sikh. So that is a serious problem for the future intellectual growth of our community. What I'm also worried about is that in 140 or so universities, there are just 20 Sikh chaplains. 20 Sikh chaplains available to answer issues and concerns faced by our students within those universities. And I have another concern as well, and that is that most of the effort in the Sikh community seems to be focused on increasing Sikh representation in Sikh studies PhDs, with absolutely no effort to increase Sikh representation in other disciplines. So I'm now going to turn to the questions you've asked the witnesses to answer. And in my response, I'm going to be referring a lot to the grassroots Sikh community. This is and we've heard it already today, this is the approximately 90 to 95% of our community who do not go to the Gurdwara on a regular basis and do not care for the political struggles within the Gurdwara and beyond. In fact, they find these struggles to be quite toxic. They can be excused for believing that the existing so-called representation mechanisms are failing them. So, I'm only going to answer two questions, and the first question I'm going to answer is, are there barriers or opportunities within current representation mechanisms? And panel and chair, these have been answered already, but I'm just adding further support and maybe another angle. Let me begin with representation of Sikh academics within these groups that claim to represent the Sikh community. I do not believe that the broader cross-discipline of Sikh academia have hitherto been adequately represented or consulted in any of their consultations. I do accept that religious studies scholars are occasionally consulted. However, academics from other fields such as STEM, maths, statistics, social work, psychology, law, who have expertise in these areas, who work in these areas on a daily basis as their profession, who teach these skills not just to students but also to industry, are rarely consulted. The point being that there's a huge talent pool out there that we are completely ignoring. And I'll come back to that issue in my next point. I do not believe that many of the existing groups have a transparent and or effective mechanism for consulting that grassroots Sikh community. I believe that representatives are often deliberately excluded, and I believe that some existing groups practice both conscious and unconscious bias. So unconscious bias is a problem in itself, but what I think we're seeing is active conscious bias, that we're deliberately going to exclude that group or that person or those views because they're not the views we want to represent in this consultation. Existing groups that claim to represent the Sikh community appear to be formed around Jathebandik and political lines and influences. Some are the products of fallouts with their parent organizations, and the overriding concerns and agendas of these groups appear to be motivated by these Jathebandik and political issues. One thing that I wanted to outline right at the beginning is that Sikhs in academia is not Jathebandik, and we are not political. We are, as I say, across discipline. And then finally on that issue, the issues that I've just described naturally alienate large elements of that grassroots Sikh community. They feel disconnected with the fundamental constructs and aims of these groups. It feels to that grassroots community that these groups are not representing their issues and their views. To quote a few examples, issues facing Sikh students, we have hundreds, thousands of Sikh students coming in now from the Punjab who have actually nowhere to stay. They were inadequately prepared for financing their studies. They were inadequately advised. They've arrived in the UK. On a daily basis, we see posts on Instagram saying, I'm desperate for a house, or there's a group of us. And the issues are endless. And no one is kind of listening to that group. No one is representing that particular group. But you could argue, well, that's your job, Sikhs in academia. But I'm just using that as an example. Let me give you a few more. Issues relating to immigrations, issues relating to employment matters, issues relating to the growing elderly Sikh population who are more concerned with where they will live, who will care for them, and not concerned about the Jathebandik political issues that these groups are actually concerned with. That's what they're concerned with. So as an example of projects we're involved with, because we are concerned with a whole wide range of issues that affect our community, we've run 2 collaborations with the University of Birmingham in the areas of psychological support, domestic abuse, job satisfaction concerning those of Sikh heritage. And that's what we really need to be focusing on as a community, is that grassroots. And this is my final comment. I know I said that was my final comment. This is definitely my final comment on the issue. And this is the most controversial one. And I know some of these groups will find it offensive, but I think it needs to be aired, and it already has. Many of the existing groups claiming to represent the Sikh community are disconnected, disorganized, and unprofessional. They do not have the skills or communication skills to adequately represent us. Often, I must say that it isn't their fault. It's because it's not their fault. Sometimes they've been put forward. Sometimes they've put themselves forward. But, for whatever reason, this is how they are. They're not representing us in the way that I think we would like them. And in many cases, overriding and underpinning political rivalries and gripes influence and motivate their agendas. And this is the point I'm trying to make, is it's just not getting down to that grassroots kind of representation. Final point. Now, the second question I want to answer is, what is the case for establishing a central liaison mechanism which advocates for the UK Sikhs at governmental policy and consultation level? Well, I suppose the case is quite clear. And the method is, in terms of the objectives, it's to answer all of the above. But the point I want to make is that the Sikh community cannot continue on the trajectory hitherto experienced. There is a strong case for reforming or restructuring. I'm not advocating that we form a new group, but whatever has to happen, we can't continue on that. And that reforming and restructuring mechanism must include a wide range of voices, some which will conflict, affiliations, ages, professions, and it must not be guided or influenced or underpinned by political or jathebandik factors. They've got to represent the grassroots. At its core, this group will or should comprise of a cross range of professions, a cross range of ages, a cross range of jathebandik views. I'm not even saying that we should cut out all the jathebandik views. That's not the point here. We have to represent the community much better than we are. That's the point, right? And once the group becomes infiltrated by one particular agenda or one particular jathebandik view, that's when we start to self-destruct. And that's what, as Raminderji said a few moments ago, that's what we have done. We set out with good intentions, but then we go into a period of self-destruction, which ultimately results in factions setting off and setting up yet another group.
So you mentioned about there being 240 universities across the UK.
140.
140, sorry. And there only being 20 Sikh chaplains across those. How do you foresee those chaplains working with existing, say, Gurdwara Jathebandiyan to represent the voice of young people?
Okay. Well, I think the problem here is the 120 chaplains that don't exist. I'm not as worried about the 20 that are in situ, because at least they're there. It's the other 120 that we need to put into place, and that is a project that Sikhs in academia are working on. And by this time next year, we'll have a lot of news. This is fundamental. I'll tell you why. When Sikh students have problems at universities, they are told to, they're signposted to a few places, but one of the people they can't go to is the Sikh chaplain, because there isn't one there. So they often go to the chaplain, the Anglican chaplain, or whoever they go to. They don't always come to us. This is the other thing. They don't always come to academics. It's the natural university signposting sends them to the chaplain.
I would like to commend you for the services Sikh in academia is doing for the community at large. My question to you would be on the second limb. It's a very impressive evidence that you have given, but my question to you would be, and what I said to Jogaji also, hypothetically, even if we assume we do not have a majority voice, Sikh in academia, Sikh in law is there, we have jathebandis, we have senior people. What if we start from here and we establish a liaison committee? How do you foresee a structure of that committee? As I've mentioned before, we have done policy challenges with very little input from our community leaders of the past. But what has happened. So what do you foresee? What sort of structure should we do to start with to give a positive news to the government so that we can liaise in a better way?
Okay.
Thank you.
So the first thing that you are already doing, which hasn't really happened before, is that you're consulting. Whether people choose to engage with that or not is their problem, not yours. You have opened it up, and anyone can contribute, and that's the first step in any kind of initiative like this. Is you've got to give people the chance to speak and to express their voice, and that's what you have done. And you've got evidence bundles, and I'm sure you'll go through them and you'll gather all that opinion. I like the idea of job descriptions, but I'm not so keen on the regional representation. I'll tell you why. Because it's job descriptions you want to fill. You've got roles that need to be filled, and you want the best people to fill those roles, regardless of what their specific political affiliation is, what their caste is, what samparda they're from, whether they are actually Amritari or Sajdari. I think that, to me, doesn't matter. You want the best people to fill those roles, because that is what will give the confidence to that next generation, especially. That's the generation that I'm talking about, all those Sikh students who are not going to the Gurdwara, and they're not going to go to the Gurdwara, they're not going to enter the committees, but they want to see a professional body like this set up and get the confidence that we're doing things right. So I like that idea. Put the best people in that job. Have an interview process, have assessment centres, assessment days, whatever it takes to get the best talent in the UK at that table that you're trying to set up.
Just a lot of the engagement with the Sikh community and the policymakers are only engaging with Londoners, for example.
So what I would suggest is, and I know politically it's not correct, but positive discrimination in the following sense. So we have a vacancy for a student rep on our committee now. And we are actively looking to recruit a student rep from London because they're not very well represented there. So we know in the talent pool that exists in London, there will be someone that can fill that position. So now we'll have a representative there. We've got a representative in the north, and the Midlands is well covered. So you're trying to do two things. You are trying to get that geographical spread, but you're also trying to get the best people. And ideally, you want to tick both boxes. And when you're finding that all the applications are coming from London, then you might want to drive it up north and try to get more interest from over there before you start shortlisting. And
Sikhs in law have done an amazing